good afternoon, everybody. It's really good for me to be back. I'm at the other spectrum to all of you. I think I'm probably the oldest, certainly the oldest person in the room. I've been around for a long time, even just before ADB began. I worked in this institution for 24 years plus. I'm a retiree, and I retired 10 years ago, and I'm still here, still working as a consultant on various projects. I've been around for a long time, and so I've got some experience of transport policy over the years. And it's interesting how Asia has changed. I first came to Asia in the early 70s, working in Malaysia, of all places. Unfortunately, it's a country which graduated from ADB lending, and so unfortunately ADB staff don't get the opportunity to go there. But yeah, Asia has changed. When I first came to Asia, I couldn't understand why ADB didn't get involved with things like urban transport. And one of the first things I did was write a short review of why ADB should get involved with transport. And my DG at the time, he took me to one side and he said, "Charles, you must understand, ADB was set up to help the rural poor. Back in the 60s in this part of the world, many countries here couldn't feed themselves, and starvation was a big problem. I know when I worked in Indonesia, it was a big problem growing enough rice, feed everybody. Even here in the Philippines, it was before IRI was created, and there was a big problem in whether we all had enough rice. And ADB in those days, half the bank was involved with rural development and irrigation, agriculture programs. How things have changed. Asia has now grown up. It's been able to, most countries can now feed themselves, and we certainly have enough capacity to grow enough food, and we probably waste more food every day than we like to know of. But the bank has changed. It's become much more of an infrastructure-related bank. And as Nana pointed out, transport is by far and away one of the biggest areas of the ADB activity, and together with the energy sector, probably more than half the bank lending goes in infrastructure. And for me, one of the joys of working in an institution like this is actually working with transport policy. Many of you come from the Philippines. I think one of my key projects I worked on here, which you may find hard to believe, was actually dealing with air quality in Metro Manila. Back about 15 years ago, I was given this terrible task of helping Manila to improve its air quality. In the days of Fidel Ramos was president, he said, ADB, please come and help us. And it was a major task. There was a big change in government. We were just moving to the Estrada government at the time, and changing air quality is all about getting stakeholders together and to agree on changing a lot of policies. And one of the major policies we had to get in place was the Clean Air Act. It's never easy getting legislation passed wherever you are. And since most of you are Filipinos, you will know how easy it is to get anything through your own Congress. But nonetheless, we were quite successful. We got the Clean Air Act through very, very quickly in Estrada's early years, and everyone was very happy. They had a new law in place. But of course, new laws don't mean anything unless they're implemented. And this is the struggle we've had ever since. But it was groups of people like yourselves who were really interested in dealing with environmental issues here in Metro Manila, who helped us in the bank. We put together the implementing rules and regulations. We helped the Environmental Management Bureau with stakeholder participation. We held meetings, all over the Philippines. I think we had a group of about almost 500 here in all of this auditorium to discuss the IRRs here in Metro Manila. And it was a real experience getting a new piece of policy in place and getting a whole set of changes in place. And today, some of the benefits, we still have many of the benefits actually in terms of cleaner fuel, cleaner vehicles, despite I know you will suffer from problems of breathing poor quality air, but the numbers of vehicles has overtaken almost everything. But nevertheless, some of those key pieces of legislation, they are in place. They need to be enforced, maybe with your new Secretary of the Environment. Maybe once she's turned away from mining, maybe we'll get some more emphasis on air quality. But getting these kind of challenges in place, I think when you work in an institution like this, is really satisfying. And I've worked on projects all over Asia Pacific. I'm currently working on road safety in Central Asia. It covers 10 countries. Again, it's always very exciting going to these places and discussing with senior people in government about the policies needed to improve the situation, what changes are required, etc. So working in a development institution like this is not just getting hold of money and building things. You can actually do a lot more by changing the laws, the regulations, the policies, and these can be much more effective in the longer term than actually spending $1 billion on building a bit more tarmac or a few more rail lines. And so these are the interesting things I think you need to think of when you start working in development, as what do we want to achieve and how are we going to achieve it. Just building infrastructure isn't the only solution. Really, you want to start looking at the policies. Many of you probably had a big struggle getting to the building here this morning, just like I did. I live in Parañaque, and it's only 15 kilometers, but it very often takes me an hour and a half to get here these days. And I'm pretty sure in a year's time it's maybe taking closer to 2 hours. There's lots of talk in this town about how we're going to improve transport overnight. It's not going to happen. As you probably all realize, it takes time to put in place new infrastructure and new ways of doing things. Perhaps we should all stay at home and just use our phones and our computers to dialogue with one another and do our business in a different way. But there are different ways of skinning a cat. These are all things that we need to look at when we start looking at solving problems. So that's all I want to say. It's great to see you all here, and whilst I'm representing what's gone in the past, I look forward to, hopefully all of you will looking forward to the future and developing the things that I used to do and taking them 3 or 4 stages forward. Thanks.